So as we all know, for this season of The Flash, leading into Crisis on Infinite Earths, we are getting Ramsey Russo, aka Bloodwork, as the big bad, who, as we have been teased with early on, is an old friend of Caitlyn's, as we saw in the first episode as well, and even gets involved with Team Flash before going down his dark path. Now, we traditionally know that he has the powers to control blood amongst a various few others, and I'm sure that The Flash will give like a unique twist on this, bringing his powers to life in this iteration. However, as you've probably observed from this video's title, this season we are getting something different with the new showrunner Eric Wallace coming aboard, and that is because we are having two big bads thrown into the mix. So this means that Bloodwork's story will be over and wrapped up by episode 8, which is around the time Crisis on Infinite Earths begins, and in an interview from Discussing Film with Eric Wallace, which I will leave links down in the description below, I definitely recommend checking it out, he compared Bloodwork's arc to The Thinkers, in that it would be very engaging due to, instead of being dragged out, amongst 22 episodes, which is always kind of my biggest criticism for the CW shows. Now instead, it's kind of like Wildfire, with a consistent main plot condensed into 8 episodes, which is, just something I'm kind of glad that the showrunner for The Flash actually gets. Which just sounds also as well, from what you're probably gathering, something I've always wanted with the CW, but with that said, we now have to think, like, what villain could we possibly see being the second big bad of The Flash Season 6? Now also a tiny little bit of a plug at this part of the video, guys. Of course, like the video if you do go on to enjoy it, and also I do have a Discord server. Some of you Flash fans may not be aware, but it'd be great to see some more of you in there so I can actually talk about this with you, myself, and have a conversation in the Flash channel. So I'll hopefully see some of you there. The link will be in the top pinned comment in the comment section down below. But moving onwards, it's also interesting to note that this second big bad of the season will likely be around for a few more episodes than Bloodwork, just considering that Bloodwork story, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video, concludes in episode 8 of season 6, and then we have Crisis on Infinite Earths, and as we usually now know, there's around 22 episodes in the season for The Flash, and as we learned in this recent interview, graphic novel number 2, basically part 2 to season 6, starts at episode 10 with the big bad, and Eric Wallace saying something happens to Barry, it's a game changer. However, I do want to quickly note that I don't expect this new big bad to be introduced the very episode after Crisis or anything, but still, we'll see him for a tad longer than what we see Bloodwork. So the interesting thing about just making this video in general, and why it's kind of like more of an open discussion-y video that I would love to hear your thoughts about in the comments below, is that, with The Flash, we've seen quite a lot of his biggest villains, or should I say the most popular ones, which kind of makes all of this speculation for the second half big bad quite a mystery. I mean, we've seen various elements of the Rogues, or, now we've got the new Rogues, but we've had Captain Cold and Heatwave, and, they've done the spin on the Savitar story. Of course, we've had Hunter Zolomon, aka Zoom, who was a big fan favorite, not to mention the Reverse Flash, but you know him, he's usually always back, but I'm not expecting him as a back half villain for this season. And of course, we've also had our first proper non-speedster villains, with that of Clifford DeVoe, aka The Thinker, and then Cicada, and now Bloodwork. But of course, this is on top of the lesser prominent roles of villains from the Flash's list who were made into one-offs, such as, like Turtle, Shade, and numerous others throughout the past 5 seasons. With the actual amount of Flash villains there technically are, there's loads to pull from, and I wouldn't be surprised if the CW plucked another somewhat lesser known villain and came up with something new for the show in the back half, similar to what they've done with Bloodwork. Now don't get me wrong there, Bloodwork is a known villain, but I wouldn't exactly put him on the popularity level of some of the other villains we've seen the Flash, on the CW face off against in the early seasons. But then again, just because a character isn't as boomingly popular as others, that doesn't mean, not even remotely to be honest, that their stories can't be just as good against the Flash, if not better than what we've had before. I mean, it's all about the story at the end of the day, even though at the same time I do know how much some of you guys love speedster villains. However, talking about speedster villains, another factor I want to add into this is that do fans really want to see another non-speedster villain after DeVoe, Cicada, and now Bloodwork? Well, you'd have to think that Eric Wallace is taking this into account, but there's only so many evil speedsters that you can do, and I feel like, they've done quite a few already. Plus, they've also weaved the Reverse Flash into the end, or, well, should I say middle, of The Flash Season 5, which, ultimately saw him escaping, so you technically could argue a speedster villain has been involved recently in the show, which could mean yet again towards the back half of The Flash season 6, they could still stick to a non-speedster. However, to be honest with you, and in my opinion, I was always one to say before that I didn't really mind a non-speedster villain, popping up in the show. We had our fill, but now I'm actually ready, and I think it's a suitable time to do one in some form or another. And it would just be for half a season. It's not like it's a full season long one, so it just feels like the opportune moment. If they do want to do a speedster though, who could they do? I mean, they could introduce the long speculated villain for season 6, if you guys remember, before we even knew we were getting 2, which was of course the Red Death, as first teased by Captain Singh in the future. Now, don't ask me how right now, or how they could even do that if it's a form of Bruce Wayne in the comics. I mean, I think we all know that the CW would do their own spin, but anyway, this would be pretty cool to see, and perhaps no matter what villain we get, they could be a result of what happens in Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, that's always a great excuse to have, and to be honest, I feel is quite a likely case no matter who this villain turns out to be. Of course, I had to include this one in here because most recently with The Flash season 6 episode 1, we saw that at the very beginning of the episode they tackled Godspeed, which contained a lot of mystery as to how or why Barry and Team Flash have caught 4 versions so far this summer. And also to note, these quote-unquote Godspeeds, if you will, weren't even the August Heart that we know him to look like. Now, this is definitely setting up something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the show is setting up Godspeed to be the back half villain like quite a few of you guys seem that it might be, which I totally get at the same time. But it seems in my books, like many others have also speculated, that due to that weird like alien noise that came out of that Godspeed's mouth, if you will, are we calling this Godspeed if it isn't Godspeed? I mean, I guess he was wearing the suit. It could be potentially a factor or early Crisis foreshadowing, with many speculating, as I said, that it could be a very, very early implementation of the CW's iteration of perhaps a form of Shadow Demon or early recon, so to speak, set up by the Anti-Monitor. Now guess what, guys? Obviously there's no way to know for sure as to why there's currently 3 Godspeeds sitting in Iron Heights with this 4th one heading there, right? Well, I guess he's already there, but you know what I mean. But I'd lean more towards Crisis setup rather than a second villain setup. But you never know. Let's just leave it at that until we do ultimately no. Other than that though, I would really like to see the Flash tackle Cobalt Blue. I mean, this is, something that's been echoed for the longest time, and maybe even you watching this right now are feeling the exact same way, like why the hell not? I know for the longest time as well it's been like, oh, Eddie should do it in some way or another, and I think that ship has sailed regardless of if any of you are going to insert the whole, but what about Crisis and, something like that? Someone like Eddie could come in, but I really don't think that will be the case. But, if they could write a cool enough story to include a villain like that of Cobalt Blue, that would be awesome. And I actually feel like they could make him also last a whole season. So would you prefer him, if they were to do Cobalt Blue, just chucking this out there, to be in this half of the season, or would you rather him be a 22 episode long villain, but also risk the factor of what even Eric Wallace said himself with how it kind of drags out in between all of that filler and stuff like that? And another tease just to kind of leave you guys thinking after seeing this video is that Eric Wallace said in that interview we discussed earlier with, discussing film nonetheless, that once people meet that villain, they'll understand there's a somatically and emotionally a reason that Bloodwork and this other villain were chosen. And they tie into a much overarching larger theme that will then become apparent in the second half of the season, so that you see how things are linked together. So I don't know if that will help any of you guys crack down who you think Eric Wallace could be going with for the villain from episode 10 onwards, but I would love, as I said at the beginning, to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. With videos like this, I really do want to encourage discussion, and who knows, maybe one of you guys with one of your suggestions in the comments will actually guess who Eric Wallace will decide to go with for the Flash's second half big bad villain. So that's the video, guys. I'm not pretending to know who that second half villain is, because it's kind of impossible to know unless there's a leak. This video is more about just talking about who it could be. As you've probably gathered, gathered from my mind in this video that I think I definitely would like it to be a speedster. I think if ever there's a time to tackle another speedster villain after a couple of seasons of not having one, now is kind of the time to do it. Just primarily that it's been a little while now, and so we don't drag another one out through the whole 22 episodes thing, why not have a really wicked speedster villain, have less episodes to do it from episode 10 onwards, but as a result of that, it would be constantly engaging, you know, main plot more or less all the time. And as what Eric Wallace said, comparing the Bloodwork villain storyline, it's like wildfire. They're really just getting to the meat of it all the time and cutting out all of the dragging elements that we usually get with a 22 episode villain. So honestly, my vote is speedster villain. I want a speedster villain, whether that's Red Death or, you know, God knows if they think of something cool to do with Godspeed, I don't know. But either way, let me know what you want to see down in the comments below. I'm willing to bet that it's another speedster villain for a lot of you, but let me know who you want it to be, which speedster villain, and why. Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. As I mentioned in the middle of the video or at some point, join my Discord server. Down in the top pinned comment is the link where you can click on it and join the server, and you can have conversations with me about this very subject matter in there. But thank you so much for those who reached this point of the video and shared your time with me today, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.